Hello everyone and welcome to the OMA Heliport. It is a creation that is a work in progress. It's actually currently out for my YouTube members and for my Discord server boosters, but it's out in its beta stage, and with the final release, I've been thinking about adding something. So in the add-on menu here, you'll see, I'm giving you a little teaser, spoiler here, we have 11 locations, so we'll see which of these stay in the final version. But if we jump to the vehicles, you'll see there are a lot of vehicles. There's a bunch of trucks, we got a bunch of support vehicles, we have all these UniCon containers that I've been working hard to release, and finally we have all these helicopters. But currently, only this guy, the RX 318, can fit a UniCon container, or two. The other ones can probably tie them to the underside with a magall or something, but only this one fits it. So I wanted to make a helicopter that kind of is between these two. So there are a lot of different types of cargo helicopters, including heavy lifts. So this is definitely in the cards for me to make as well, but something caught my eye as I was kind of flipping through some of these images. There was one helicopter in particular that stood out. It just looks so wild with its cockpit kind of above the storage compartment, and you can see there are actually two versions. There's a smaller and a larger one that have different configurations, and what's wild is there's actually a flying camper that you can find. There's a whole video on it. It's a really interesting topic, and maybe I'll make one of these later on, kind of like a air gull mixed with one of my helicopters there. So really neat history there. But first and foremost, I would like the larger of the UniCon containers, two of them, to fit in this helicopter platform. So with that in mind, I can kind of make the minimum sized shape for the thing, and it'll look something along the lines of this. Now, minimum shape meaning this size has to be here, and then what I can do is obviously have it kind of come in and whatnot, so it's not going to stay this size, but you get the gist. Expanding on the tail section here specifically allows me to really make use of this shape. Now, the nice thing about merging or blending in these curved pieces is you can end up doing something like this. So even if I take a 1x4 as you have here, I can end up with something like this, and as I go on, it'll start to take shape and look more and more curved. Alright, the tail end seems to be okay. Now, of course, as I'm building, I may decide to make some minor changes. You can see that doesn't really work, and what we're going to want to do is grab the UniCon containers, get them out of here. So remember how I said we're keeping it the minimum profile or minimum size, meaning even by putting a something above this, it can't actually, I can't go ahead and put a floor here, otherwise you'll see what happens. But that is the size I want. I don't want it to be any bigger, and keep in mind when these fall back down, you are going to have a gap of one block above there. So we're just going to yank these out, delete all this stuff, and now start up with the top area. Now, what's interesting with these helicopters is they are kind of a little bit like double-decker buses or something. So what I'm going to do is have some configuration of blocks reaching up here to make the cockpit here, and the jet engine motor will be in the very front, in the nose of the helicopter. I did put seats just to see how high I do have to make this, and I really don't want it to be too cramped. Like, that is way too low. I at least want it to be a little bit higher than that, and I'm not a fan of these sort of jumping shapes here, so I'll see what can be done. I actually ended up with kind of like a split design. You could see here, it kind of goes up, one platform goes up a little, another platform, and then this. I'll see if this is practical to leave as such, or if I should just close it off. I do feel like by closing the whole thing off and making it have a flat roof here, it'll probably help us also, because we do have to still have the rotor attaching somewhere here and kind of branching out. So that is one of those things here, but you could see the back is really taking shape, and I've begun on the front end. These things do have more of a boxy design such as this, and with a little bit of playing around, you could see I got some interesting design elements, including this, which I think could end up looking really neat in terms of paint job, having that really thin line there. So I'm going to leave that. Of course, the front we're going to open up, and we have this whole forward compartment for the jet engine right here. So like I said, I was able to make this extended a little bit now without the helicopter rotor. It looks like a fish of some kind, which I guess is okay. Maybe I could use this for a submarine as well, I suppose. I know people have been asking me for a large submarine, and this seems to be the perfect chance to do something. But regardless, we do have this area here with just enough space for a hatch. Of course, there has to be access to get in from the cargo hold into the cockpit. Doesn't have to be very nice. I mean, just even the actual helicopter just had like a little hatch and probably ladder. So this will probably do the trick, but overall the front shape is really coming nicely. These helicopters actually do have doors that open, so you don't have to get in through the hatch on the floor, but what we do have to do is put some landing gear right here. Now this configuration probably will look better like that, so I'll see. I think I want to get rid of this and have it less boxy there on the bottom. Instead, we're just going to use one of these all the way across like that. Now there will be a door here, and where the door is, I will actually have a little bump out area, because if you've been following my UniCon system, we have to have some connectors here and here to be able to pair the uniloader to the helicopter. Alright, well, I've brought in the big boy, the RX-318, and you could really see how narrow the new one is, but it's going to actually have all the same features and options as the bigger helicopter, which is going to include down here sort of an opening floor where you can have kind of people parachuting or dropping winches and things, so it'll be fully loaded. Just extracting the engine from the 318 over there, you see that in this configuration it will not fit in the nose, but what I'm going to do is actually use one of the jet ducts that allows me to change the direction and have something out popping out in a sideways configuration, probably vertically, to be honest, in here. Alright, if you take a look now at the engine, we have our duct here in the front, and it comes down. We have our compressor, down there the turbine, and I believe the last bit here is for the power. So we have a little bit of everything. Turbines down there, yeah. This is the combustion chamber, and this is the compressor. So for such a kind of small compartment, I was able to fit it properly. Now, this whole space is a gas tank, but I foresee problems with it being super front heavy. So we'll see how that works and possibly mitigate any disaster later down the road. I'm bringing in the microcontrollers. Now, my usual way of business is to recycle microcontrollers where I can. I'll probably make a video about this topic later on, but really, I made this helicopter. This took a long time to make, and I can start to go into here and think, all right, I need the altitude hold, and then I find the right one, if I can even find the right one, and do that. Or, you know, just drag things over from the exact same spot like this. And then when I do that, I'm going to drag in other portions of the build. So in my opinion, this speeds things up drastically. It is a little cumbersome and sometimes annoying, just because I can only take so much of this. There's really no creativity other than kind of putting things in convenient spots, such as me putting the microcontrollers in this area here. I'm going to fit them in this whole forward wall, and I'm going to fit them in this whole backward wall. So there's a lot of space for microcontrollers, but it is just a bit of a chore, I guess, at this point. We're going to spawn it in, and voila. Well, the door is definitely not attached, but the overall shape is really nice. You could see we got our door that's not connected yet, but it does seem to have a good size, a good shape, and you can see here in comparison to the 118, it is a little heftier, a little wider. This one has these pods for landing gear, so overall I think even this one's longer, but this one will have more inside storage capacity. This one is kind of long but narrow, and pretty much an entirely different configuration altogether. As always, I've painted yellow the parts that I'm going to replace with microcontrollers, so it's very easy for me not to mess something up and ruin potentially something I have in certain locations, but it's coming. One thing that this helicopter really has to have is a sliding door. So currently the configuration was to have it on a pivot, and the pivot would open just like any other door that I usually have. But I do think having a really nice sliding door system will be so much better, and it's gonna make the helicopter stand out. Like, watch that. It'll make the helicopter stand out from all of its other variants, so it'll be special in that sense. The tricky part will be to hide the mechanism, especially considering that the mechanism itself is a little cumbersome. It's a little large, just because of the size of the blocks, so there's not really much that can be done here. I don't want to lose headroom, so you see it with this, if this gets mounted in here, then when the door opens, you'll see that we're going to end up with the rail right up there, and that rail eats into the height. And if you remember, we made this thing about as small as possible, so this height now would mean that the UniCon containers have to fit exactly right into this space. There's absolutely no wiggle room, and it's nicer to make it a little bit bigger opening, so this will have to get reconfigured. I'll probably have to shove it up into there. I was able to put it into the ceiling here, and now with this setup, you'll actually see that, oh, we are very, very front heavy because this whole compartment is currently filled with jet fuel, so that is not ideal. But if we open the door, that is nice and open, but this is definitely something that's going to be problematic here. You'll see I did connect a lot more of the microcontrollers. We're practically nearly there, so just a little bit more work and this will be finalized and ready to fly. The hatches are added on the floor, and here is the controller to make it all operate. I do have to add a door on this side. I wasn't going to because of the position of this sliding door, but I do think it will be to my advantage to have two doors here. You'll see the cockpit is looking very good now. It's looking pretty much complete. It is a smaller version of what you see in the other helicopter, obviously, given the space constraints. And I've went ahead and shoved microcontrollers pretty much everywhere I can find. And there we have it. There is no more logic leaving this helicopter. Everything is within the body. So I can go ahead and fire up the engines. You can hear them spooling up, and if I turn on the rotors, watch the RPS, seems to climb. We got our displays going. Alright. Oh, we have the landing gear, so as I pitch forward like this, I want to be able to slide on my landing gear, and we're off. Take a look at this. So, the helicopter is officially airworthy, but I do think that all that fuel in the front end will cause problems. You'll see even here, it seems to be like very, very front heavy. In fact, it's pitching forward right now, and the microcontroller or the gyroscope should balance it out, but if we do abrupt movements, just from a earlier test I did, I was actually able to have it lose control. Oh, we may save it after all, so I did do a little flip there, but it is very much front heavy, and just doing something like that will damage it and destroy it and make it very much not able to fly. If I strip away the side, you'll see what I've done here. I put a bunch of tanks. Now, the tanks don't have as much capacity as a custom tank, but they have an advantage, and that is their weight doesn't slosh around and doesn't really add as much weight as the actual fluid kind of sloshing around. But you'll see that we've maxed out at 6,500 or thereabouts. I really want to have more than 10,000 liters, or just about 10,000 liters in this, and I shoved tanks just about everywhere I could. There's tanks here, all up in the front, and I'm gonna put some here in the back as well. Alright, I'm gonna scrap that actually. What I've done instead, and you'll see, if I go here it says 7,200, if I go here it says 11,000. How is that possible? Well, there is 7,000 gas or diesel or jet fuel in here, not all the way full, but I did actually put more jet fuel in this back compartment, so it's in the tail end, and that actually should balance out our fuel problem and make it a little more stable, albeit in the extremities, which isn't ideal. It would be better to keep the fuel tank here near the center, but it is what it is. One thing that I've done to counteract any problems that one may have, specifically, I don't want to fill up gas there and here. I want to only have one filler, and what I've done is there's actually a series of piping that goes here. There's even a variable valve or fluid on-off valve that is controlled by a controller that stops gas from filling up once it hits 55% of its capacity. So 55% of the front space is full. That stops, cuts off, and this area can no longer be filled. Now, funny enough, I actually piggybacked into the piping for the tail rotor. So my RPS that travels all the way to my tail rotor is also the same pipe that transports the fuel, the jet fuel, from this compartment to the engine. And I did not allow the two compartments to mix. I have very strict these flow meters, flow valves, directional flow valves that prevent mixing, so it really should be able to work its way into the jet fuel or into the jet motor without kind of ending up in here, and that's what all these are about. So as you can see right now, the front and the back, they're not mixing. They're not pouring into one another or balancing out, because actually what would be happening is all of the fuel from the back would end up here in the front, just because of I guess the level of the valves, and it would end up pouring. And I experienced that and I stopped it. Now, the UniCon support was pretty much what this whole thing started being, and we do have to make sure that it does work. So I'm just gonna line up here, make sure that the button is pressed and then raise the platform up. And we locked it in place. Perfect. So you can see now that the platform is locked in place and I can transfer over UniCon containers and have a pretty nice system of filling the thing up. If you don't want to use forklifts, this is actually very nice and convenient. Of course, now there are minor details and things I still have to add, but it is time to color it. Now, I really want to make an Alta version, a cargo version purely, but I do think for me it's easier to start off with a search and rescue version, because if I start off with a search and rescue version, I'm able to put the crane or the winches, put the safety support systems that I already have in my other helicopter, and then easy enough to remove them. Like the Alta transport helicopter really does not need an opening floor hatch. It does not need this control panel. It'll be easy to remove rather than finding space to put that in. So, like I said, we're just going to start off with a search and rescue version. I just love these colors. For me, the blue and the orange reminds me of those Lego sets. Just such a nice visual experience. And between the lineup of all the helicopters, you really can see how the styling matches closely together. So really happy with how that turned out. And actually, this is a good visual representation. Yes, this one is slightly wider because of those landing gear, but like you really do see a size difference and height difference in this guy. All right, I didn't show the door that was added here. So you could see the doors, you kind of go up, go back down. The cockpit is now fully colored, painted, looks good. We got our hatch. I actually put a little buzzer that can buzz up into the cockpit. A radio would probably be better, but just for a little bit of fun, if someone's down here, they can kind of signal the pilots. And now we don't have that lights plugged in, so I've got to fix that. That door button has to move, and in fact, I have to make that whole door wider. Alright, so I moved the stopper to here, and now when the door opens up, it actually opens up quite nice and big. Just have to finish this painting, and to keep the styling consistent, I will actually have this go to there, and then have my wider block there and there, just so it kind of looks like that's the part of the door, like the bottom part of the door is where this is. So just have to make sure it's all colored to match. But we are really in the final steps. I do have a little weapons armory, and I will have to see how and where I put some storage. I did make a whole fake wall here. This wall should be pushed back by this much if I really wanted more cargo, but I put this here because now it actually enables me to put parachutes and things, whereas here I had microcontrollers. So the equipment will start to make its way into the helicopter, and not only that, so like I said, the door's wider. Right now there is no weapons. There will be, just very small ones. I kind of do see the OSAR as semi Coast Guard-ish. They really don't have like armed vehicles, but in case of emergencies, they do have some form of weaponry. Inside the cockpit, you could see it's pretty much completed, so just some small minor details like painting. And I have kind of like a standard type of equipment that I put in certain spots. So for example, here in the cockpit, I actually have the winter jackets. So if you are in the Arctic and you end up getting out, you're nice and warm. So I'm going to put that here in the back of the cockpit. Of course, it would be nice to have parachutes for them too, but it will just be this for them here. And do I have space in the doors, like right here, to put some of the other parts of equipment that I have in the other helicopter? You see that what I normally put in the cockpit is like emergency flares, radio, binoculars, and in this case I put them on both sides, the exact same things. Because that other helicopter is smaller, most likely I'm just gonna have the binoculars here for the pilot, so the pilot can see nicely, and then I'll have different gear there for the co-pilot, who's gonna have more of the emergency type gear. So here we have the binoculars, so you can easily see into the distance and see where one is flying. Actually, this is a much better spot for those two binoculars. You see that down here, I actually have, I left some random empty blocks because I never ended up using them for anything, and now that is the perfect place to put the binoculars. With the armory, I try to always maximize the things to put into it. For example, like this. When the door is here, you still can access all of the weapons, including up there the armored vest, and down here the rifles. So that is sort of to maximize the capacity of things. Alright, that has to be plugged in to systems, otherwise it should all be functional. I put a bunch of equipment over here for sort of rescue safety. I may end up putting some more equipment up here, specifically in the rescue department, things that are good for search and rescue missions, whether it's just the fire extinguisher or first aid. Not bad to have here in the cockpit. Even having it beneath this seat isn't a terrible idea, just like that. A little more usable things, though I kind of like how that looks. Just looks like a foldable seat. I moved the breakers and I kind of like it more back there. So now we have some first aid and fire extinguishers here. We have some things here. Now, because of the configuration of this, you see that I can't use this area for anything. Technically, I could use this space and put another little, call it first aid station there as well. So we have 2 defibs and 3 times the first aid gear, just so it's a little easier to access. Overall, I think that's pretty well stocked. Yes, this one does have more equipment, and I probably want to put at least some of these hoses and cables and things. But those can go closer to the floor level, like there, and they won't really look too off. We don't need a lot of them, we just need some of them, so we have spares in case we end up accidentally dropping our cables, or if we end up requiring something else. So I'm going to put that there, and I can mirror the other side with a hose and a rope. So we have different things in the different locations, just to give us a little bit more of a variety. So we'll do that, and then we'll put a hose up front. The hose itself really doesn't have much that we can plug it into, but it is still smart to have one on board for whatever thing that may arise. One thing I don't currently have is a release for the UniCon slots, and that's where this comes in. So I am going to just put a very, very simple release thing. I honestly don't even really want to put anything fancier. I don't want to really put any call it lights or things. This is why it's good to sort of work, is because you may come across things that were merged or not working properly anymore. That should be fixed now. Alright, that is much better. So now that works. Closes and all. So that's really useful to have a proper door. So yeah, I don't have any releases for the UniCon system, which obviously will be important to have so I don't have to manually unplug the UniCons themselves. The one downside is that it does not have the H4 connectors on the bottom because it has fixed landing gear, and we'll just have to live with that. So it's not really going to be able to pair up with ships and things. Maybe I make a different version that can. So now for a final test, let's see if we can actually load it up and put the UniCon containers inside and take off, use it, all that good stuff. First thing to note is because the orientation of the helicopter relies on, call it the main direction, going like this, that means we actually have to pick up the containers in their side direction. So we don't want to use the main direction, we'll just rotate it like this, and then we could use the loader. Granted, this is the large one, but we can do this, and that should give us the ability to put this in to the helicopter. Now this is the extra wide one, so quite curious if it'll actually fit. I've not tested the wide one, I've only tested the regular sized ones. So as I approach, we'll see if we can put it through the door here. Oh yeah, there we go. Alright. Kind of worked. A little difficult, but it gets there in the end. So in this case, it seems putting this worked, and this is actually full of liquid. So this is the heaviest version of the UniCon possible. Can I squeeze myself through? Yes, good. Can't go there. I guess I could use the seat and put myself back here. So now I can release the H4, release the perpendicular, and push it down, and then enable that, and it should lock itself in place. Now what's stopping us is, or was, the harnesses. So you can see the whole thing's shaking a little bit. So I may want to just release this cable. So over there right now there seems to be a bit of a clash because these things are just squished. So shouldn't really hold us back, but oh, I spoke too soon. So it seems that doing that ends up getting this container quite upset. So in this case, let's just throw this out of the helicopter. Remember, this is the rescue version. If we want to have the more cargo version, then that's where I think using the Alta variant that has probably none of these safety harnesses, but rather just kind of has a pure there we go, has a pure cargo setup such as this. So the safety harnesses, while great, they're kind of not the main feature of the OSAR version. I do think that the fact that I can fit the large container is great, but with a smaller size container such as those, this would not have happened. So now for the crate, oops, I seem to have connected everything but what I wanted. So we got to make sure that the crates themselves are not locked up. That one I opened up. Over here, this one is locked in place too. Get it free. There we go. That leaves this one. So this one I'll pick up. Turn the magulls on, but not attach them to the ground. That's important. Otherwise you'll just stick to the ground. Alright. Now keep in mind this is the largest of the UniCon kind of front loaders, skid steers, which is what you'd want if you're trying to pick up the heavy one that I did first. But for this regular crate, you don't have to have a very fancy one. There we go. Release that. Back up. Alright, so this seems to have worked. Everything is in place. That is released, which is actually good because now these two aren't trying to connect to each other. So I can go ahead, close the door. Beautiful. And then make my way up into the cockpit. So that was the first part of the test. And now, with that all loaded up, we can fire the thing up. And release the rotor clutch. And see if we have enough strength to lift up with all of this load. Now keep in mind, we are using the heaviest UniCon, which is the one filled with water, the firefighting one, and we're still able to lift up, so that is good. It has a good lift capacity, and even loaded up now, we should get a fairly nice top speed. So if I lock in the altitude, lock in the heading, and even turn on a pitch override as such, that is pretty much almost an autopilot form of transport. We'll need our running lights, our exterior lights. So there you have it. Now you can't drop the UniCon containers out very easily just because it is kind of cramped down there. But I'd imagine that with enough... Oh, look at that. So I turned off all the wrong things. Of course, the same thing will happen in any of my helicopters. If you kind of just start turning off all the overrides, you will want to balance out and think about it before you just turn it off. Specifically the pitch override, I believe, because it's tilting the helicopter forward. And now all of a sudden it's off, so you're better off lowering it back down. But regardless, it does seem to work. I will do some fine touches and edits and things, but the overall idea of the helicopter is actually very satisfactory. So I'm very happy with how this all turned out. And you can see here, like I said, one can still deploy the UniCon containers out the side door on the perpendicular tracks. It just would be something that you kind of have to squeeze in because it's not a very wide compartment, and these are in the way, of course, if you're trying to load up the large UniCon system. Yes, I can extend it by one block, but I am trying to keep it pretty small, keep the profile small, and I may end up making larger versions or extended versions or whatever later down the road. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video making another helicopter. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and actually it looks really cool. So thank you all for watching. I do want to thank all of my Discord server boosters and thank my YouTube members. They will have early access. In fact, they already have access to this helicopter. So that is something that they get to enjoy. And eventually it will be out for everybody after some more final test runs and all that good stuff. It'll be out especially also with the OMA heliport. That is ultimately the reason why I made it, just to give another helicopter to the heliport and make it that much more of a fun add-on for everyone to use. So thank you all, and until next time, happy Stormworksing. So test number 2, if I turn off this, it should balance itself back out nicely, so that isn't the problem. But I had all this stuff on heading hold and altitude hold and pitch override. If I just start turning all that stuff off, the thing does get kind of upset. If I turn them back on, the systems are happy again. So it does have to do with something here. Well, obviously the altitude hold, the pitch override has to be turned off first. And it catches itself. Yes, I know the built-in gyroscope isn't very great, so that could very well be a limitation of it.